ask my panelist to come forward, Dr. Hanlie de Bod-Leaf, Chief Information Officer of Harambee. Hanlie, are you here?
Here I am.
Okay, great. Prof. Lauren Graham, I thought I saw Lauren. Yep, perfect. Prof. Al-Ani, is he online? Awesome. And Tim Kohler, there he is. Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to do is have a relatively free-flowing discussion. The theme of the discussion is how can we capitalize on technology-driven opportunities for youth employment and diffuse some of the risks, right? I'm going to ask each of the panelists to make an opening statement, just sharing their thoughts for 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll open for questions from the floor. I think that Tim, and who's already spoken, and some of the other panelists who have access to the app might have already seen some of the questions which have been raised on the app. And if you feel so inclined, the panelists can also address those. So we'll start out with Hanlie.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I first want to say that there's a slight error. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a miss. And I'm here as the CIO of Harambee and a technology practitioner. And then obviously we work within youth unemployment. I think for me, really important is that I'm really excited about the future of work, but there are risks and threats that we obviously need to address. Harambee, along with the Bridgespan Group, recently did some research, particularly in the sectors of business process outsourcing and tourism, which are sectors which we know are often open to youth unemployment. And there's a few things that we realize that we need to address and look at if we want to capitalize on the new technology, and if we particularly speak about automation and AI. So the first thing is that we aggressively need to skill. And I think that has come forward in all of the talks. That is really important that young people have access to digital skills and that we look at our curriculum and what we are busy with, making sure that young people can not just follow process, but can actually do problem solving along with AI augmented work. So it's really important, digital literacy, AI literacy, and then also communication and adaptability. We will be expected, our youth and the future of work will expect us to work alongside a lot of these capabilities, and therefore it's important that we have those skills. And secondly, that means demand-led skilling. We often see with digital skilling that young people have skills, but they're not always appropriate for what the job market wants. Therefore, it's really important, and we've seen this with some of our skilling partners, that we actually skill people who then go into a work environment immediately. That will make sure that people have long-term work and not just short-term skilling. And we can see examples in developing countries like India with the India AI mission, and also in Kenya with the Ajira digital program, where they really worked with government, the employment sector, and also civil society to identify those skills, and then in online platforms actually went and upskilled people. At the time of our research, India AI mission reskilled 200,000 people very quickly, and I think that's really an example we can follow. Then thirdly, and I feel like this is something we almost shouldn't say because we all know it, is infrastructure and access. For the future of work, it means that for us to be digitally competitive, we cannot just have skills alone, we need affordable connectivity, cloud access, and the infrastructure for young people to actually access that data and that skills training. And then what we see at Harambee and in the BPO research is that South Africa has a uniquely human advantage. If we look at other countries who it also has a large growth in the BPO sector or outsourcing into international markets, What stands out about South Africa is that our young people, or all our people, are very able to communicate effectively and work on areas where it's complex and we need human empathy. So a lot of companies in the developing world has gone out and said, we're just going to use AI agents. One example is Klara, a Swedish fintech company. They aggressively took these customer service agents to AI, and within 3 months, they said, 18 months, they publicly acknowledged that they were way too aggressive. Humans still want to speak to humans, especially when it comes to complex areas like in the financial sector, medical sector, and then also when they want to escalate a problem. So what we see there is that, especially in BPO, we need to redefine those roles, and that's where we need to look at that human-AI collaboration, where our agents can work with an AI agent for the more mundane queries and guidance, but when it comes to that empathy and human interaction, we are uniquely placed to offer those services. And then finally, something that is not just a technology issue, it is still an issue in our economy, and that is inclusion. We know that young people are often excluded from the job market because of the fact that they don't necessarily have the right experience or education. And I think it's up time for us to say, what do we really do about the on-ramp for young people into work? And that is something that we need to address with our private sector, government, and across all industries. And then I think, for me, as a technologist, I am optimistic that we can grab this opportunity, but we have to make sure that all parties work together. There is some policies that need to change, and we need to do that as a collective so that we make sure that we upskill and have our youth ready to be employed at the right time. Thank you.
Thanks, Hanlie. I want to hand over to Lauren. What are your views on the practical steps that we can do to try and capitalize on some of the potential while mitigating some of the risks?
So I'm going to come at this like a little bit like I did yesterday from a social policy point of view, rather than a labor market policy point of view. And I think we often think of platform work and the gig economy as this completely new form of labor. And in some ways it is, particularly if we look at algorithmic management, for instance. But it is, in fact, a form of informal work and shares many of the characteristics of informal workers. No work, no pay, no benefits, usually no access to social insurance, such as UIF and the like. But platform work also offers us an opportunity to think about social and labor market policy a little bit more differently. Because it's seen as this new form of work, and because there is a platform company that plays an intermediary role, there are opportunities for us to ask questions about what is the role of the state here, what is the role of the platform intermediary, and what does that mean for workers' protections. So I ask a question, what are the social and labor market policy implications of platform work, and can we translate those not just for platform work, but for informal work more broadly? So in popular discourse about platform work, you'll hear two main perspectives. One is it's a panacea to youth unemployment. It will solve all our youth unemployment problems because it's relatively easy to access. It offers flexible work hours, and in some instances has opportunities for pretty good income. The other switch side of it is that we see it as only a precarious form of work where platform companies devolve risk to workers, and they make huge amounts of money while circumventing labor laws, and therefore it should be discouraged completely. And I think we can't go with either of those. Both of them are true, and we have to have solutions that allow for growth in the platform economy whilst protecting workers. It is potentially risky, precarious work, if we don't have some interventions that reduce that precarity. And that's precisely why I asked this question, and you'll see in the resources that you have the article that came out of this research. So a couple of things when we we looked at location-based workers and web-based workers and asked them about their experiences of the risks, rewards, and responsibilities. Whose responsibility is it for what? What is the role of the state? What is the role of the platform? What is the role of the worker? And a couple of things that came out. Firstly, they very clearly see themselves as independent contractors. We expected that there would be some, we don't know, are we workers, are we employees, are we independent contractors? But they're very clear on this, and they're very proud of being independent contractors. They've bought into this entrepreneurial mindset that we're pushing in a context of low formal labor market growth. Secondly, for the location-based workers, their income was actually really good, much higher than our median wage in South Africa. And thirdly, they were very well aware that they were carrying all of the risk of their work. Vehicles, insurance, phones, data, no work, no pay, no leave days, etc. And this to them seemed very unfair. So what kind of solutions do we see? If we look across the globe, we have some options, particularly in Europe and Scandinavia. One is regularize the category of platform workers as independent contractors or as employees. And you saw that in Brenda's presentation earlier today, the proposal to do just that. Her proposal, the current proposal is what has happened in the UK, to force platforms to recognize workers as employees. And the third option is to outlaw platform companies that refuse to comply or refuse to recognize workers as employees. And this happened in Denmark, so Uber no longer operates in Denmark. They exited from Denmark because they refused. So ultimately, it's about, those options are about formalizing the informal in order to ensure that workers have access. But I wonder if there's not another way. Can we afford to follow the same model in South Africa if we see Uber exiting countries like Denmark? Denmark can afford that risk. Can we? Or are there other ways to approach it? Some of the solutions that came through the study that we did, although platform workers recognize that they are independent contractors, they really do want to have opportunities to share that risk. So can we think about a UIF model that includes independent contractors and informal workers more broadly? Platform work offers a stepping stone to a more inclusive UIF because it provides the mechanisms for tracking hours worked and income received, reducing the reliance on self-reporting. But extending social insurance to platform work should just be a starting point for us to think about broader inclusion for other informal workers. And there are many models, particularly from India, where we see informal workers contributing to social insurance schemes and then able to access those in economic downturns. We also have to ask the question, what is the role of private insurance? You're better off independent contractors if you think of consultants, economists who are consultants. Some of you may be in the room. They generally are purchasing private insurance, life insurance, dread disease and disability cover, etc. And in our work, we found a few instances where platform workers were purchasing their own insurance, lower-cost insurance mechanisms. And I wonder if there are opportunities for low-cost insurance mechanisms in the private sector. And then, interestingly, in the case of the web-based platform that we worked with, they were extending private insurance already to workers who were doing riskier jobs of their own accord. And they felt that that was a really important responsibility that they carried, and they were very open to risk-sharing options, including making contributions to UIF if the legal framework allowed for that. And I think we haven't had those conversations with platform companies enough about their shared responsibility. At the time that we did the research, we had some conversations with Department of Employment and Labour representatives, and they were very open to thinking about UIF options. And then we had the introduction of the COVID SRD, which sort of eclipsed that. Well, now, people have access to SRD, so we don't need to think about social insurance. But social assistance and social insurance serve different purposes in our social protection landscape, and I think we need to reopen some conversations. I would say don't force full formalization. Rather, recognize independent contractor and informal trader status as legitimate categories, not just gaps to close that can only be closed via formal employment.
Okay, so I guess what you're suggesting is a more differentiated and nuanced approach. And I think that this is also important given the fact that these international companies are huge. They probably have, their balance sheets are probably comparable to a small country. And we've already seen in competition commission proceedings, representatives of the big tech company simply didn't bother showing up, because in the greater scheme of things, we are a tiny market, compared to their global interests. I think we can move on to Professor Ayad Al-Ani. We've already seen your pre-recorded input, and I'd like to invite you to make a comment on how we can capitalize on some of the promise of this new technology, including AI, or autonomous AI agents, and how can we try and cushion some of the risks. Over to you, Prof. Al-Ani.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
And
I noticed
we can hear you now.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So thank you for having me. I noticed that my screen is quite dominant in the room, so I'm sorry for that. I have some kind of overload vibes. and if you're over 60 and you see a picture in that size, it's a bit tricky. But yeah, thank you for the question. I guess my conclusion at this stage is that we are in a situation where the whole system is about to change dramatically. So it's not just some kind of organizational development measure or some kind of new technology which we need to implement. But I think now the change is now really drastically proceeding in high speed and high velocity. And so I think we need to think out of the box. So it's not just how can we adapt the system so it can implement this technology, or it can counteract this or these effects. I think we need to have a total new thinking, because the place of work will change dramatically with digital agents. I think the political economy will change as more and more value creation is done by machines and not by humans. The foreign policy, Tanya, as you mentioned, will change, because for small countries like South Africa, the question remains is, can they do it by themselves? I would be hesitant to answer that with a yes. Or should they attach themselves to some of the global players? This is what probably everybody's doing right now. So would it be the US or China? Or would it be both to counterbalance them a little bit? So everything is new terrain, I would say, and it would make sense from my perspective to try out some of these new technological organizational combinations and pilot projects to figure out how this technology can be best used, what the effects are. So that can be done in a township where one could create a kind of digital cooperative structure and try to start production using digital agents and 3D printers. And there have been some experiments going on, but I think they have not been too successful. Why is that? What must we change? Can we create a small entity of land where we try out a couple of these new organizational forms and technology settings? What are the effects on the legal framework, on taxation and things like that? So I think it would make sense to try to figure out what answers are suitable for South Africa. And the only thing I would not advise is not doing anything, because as you might remember from my presentation, the one number intrigued me was that over 60% of South African employees and workers are already using AI. So even if the organization decides not to use AI, there will always be shadow technology, that is technology which the employees or the workers bring to work, so to say, and will use anyway. Therefore creating some kind of contradictions within the official organization. So you're already being pushed in a certain way, and people will not stop using these technologies. I think the only reason why they will stop using them if they become more costly. That's also development that is happening right now, where digital agents that were given for free are now being made more costly because the energy that is being used to power these artificial intelligences is becoming so enormous that that there's no other way around. So then what will happen? So that's also not quite clear. Will we have then a class of people who can afford digital agents and some who cannot? And what will the state do? Shouldn't it be then the job of the state to provide AI for all and for free? So I think to answer all those questions, and there are tons of questions, it would make sense to try them out in a pilot sphere. That could be, as I said before, a smart city, a township, a reserved kind of area close to the sea, whatever, where you have access to lots of trading routes, for instance, and try to figure out what the right configuration for South Africa could be. From a personal perspective, to finalize my short comment, from a personal perspective, if you're now entering the job market, I would say you still need to have at least one or two strong content knowledges or know-hows. And you can then add some technology know-how to the strong content know-how. But only content know-how will secure you some kind of entry into an official organization, and that's difficult enough because when you're young, you only had university studies and not so much practical work. But nevertheless, I think you need to figure out one or two areas where you are really strong and good at, and try to use those to get into an organization, and then use your technology skills, which you as a younger person have anyway. Therefore, you can outcompete all the other guys. So I think that could be an appropriate strategy.
The young researchers out there, Prof. Al-Ani has raised a myriad of questions that need research. Could digital cooperatives work in South African townships? What could we pilot? Because we need to start doing something. What are the gaps in our legislative frameworks? For example, UIF. And then there was also a question on the app about, do gig economy workers pay taxes, and about the tax base. So that would be, just one small sliver of the questions that could ask. But I want to address a question from the floor. It's from Jacques Tron. And I'm going to read it verbatim. Given the psychopathic nature, I'm not sure if it's of the users or the companies, but the question I'd like to direct to Prof. Al-Ani, is there a worry that companies can gain monopolistic market positions where customers, in other words, us, especially those who are using it more than once a day, become psychologically dependent on the AI? So, Prof. Al-Ani, if you could just respond, because we do know that the data centers that power these AI models are incredibly water and energy intensive. In fact, in the United States, communities are rising up against these water centers. I live in Cape Town. I've gone through a near day zero. I must say that I'm very concerned about the unregulated establishment of these data centers, because the global north will want to push these data centers to the global south, right? So the question is, why did they give it for free when there are costs attached to it? What is the business model? Is it the same business model as a drug dealer who basically gives the first shot for free, and then we become so cognitively compromised, and there is a term called cognitive outsourcing, where people are actually are not being able to think for themselves, that we become sort of addicted customers. What are some thoughts on from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a very good observation because as you correctly pointed out, companies don't like competition, so companies always prefer monopolies. I mean that's clear. So if you have the possibility to create a monopoly, then you would do it, of course. I think the question then is what to do. I mean, then you can lean back and say, okay, I condemn this. I don't want to have it. It's going in the wrong direction. But is that sufficient to raise resistance against this development? And therefore, I think, Tanya, as you correctly pointed out, is we are now in a phase where lots of this technology is being dispersed for free. Not only to make you addicted, but also to get your data and learn from you, and to make the model better. So the model now is being trained by your usage and by the way, by the tons of documents which you upload to it. Say, please correct this letter, or please correct this line of code, or please do this and that, and then the data is being used to make the model better. So for the organizations, it's a win-win situation right now, but they will slowly then start to increase the usage costs. Of course, they will do it because they have to earn money right now. They are investing tons of money in data centers and in technology and in energy. There's one prediction by Eric Schmidt is that, for instance, the US will need at least 60 new nuclear facilities just to power the energy demand from artificial intelligence. And of course, then Elon Musk will say, okay, we will try to put the data centers in space because we have low temperatures and things like that. But of course, they will also try to put them in the global south. The question then is there an option for the global south to do something about it and, for instance, have their own data centers? And I guess we have been talking about that for at least 10 or 15 years, and very little is happening. So I think we need to, regrettably, we need to consider that this is not part of the global south game. By the way, it's not. There's the same situation here in Europe. Even Europe failed with a counter strategy when it comes to American companies and American data centers. So, is there still time to do something? I think there is, but that would require that you put in place now a counter strategy, developing your own data strategy, your own data centers and things like that. Nevertheless, I think you still need to have some kind of cooperation with high-tech nations. It's either the US then or China, because they are on the front of this development, and you need to get some of those technologies for yourself. So the only way is some kind of cooperation, whether you like it or not. So that should be part of the foreign policy. And to finalize that, I think it's not sure yet where this is all going. As I mentioned before, there is always the possibility of psyops, meaning psychological operations, because the companies that offer the technology, they don't give you the technology, but you can use it perhaps for free or for some money, but you don't own the technology, and you never know at the end of the day whether the recommendation by the digital agent is neutral in the sense that the recommendation is exactly what you have been asking for, or whether the interests of the companies that own the technology are also reflected in the recommendation that the technology is giving you. So you can never be sure, and the only possibility, therefore, is to build your own. But being honest, and as a political scientist, I don't see that I don't see that political or technological movement anywhere in the global south or in even in Europe. So those regions are totally dependent on either one side or another side, and they try to make the best out of it. Is there still time? Maybe, but then you need to do something now.
Thank you very much. Before we go on to our the respondents from the response from Tim Kohler, I just want to comment on, like, for example, social media and other trends. We see the global north racing ahead, and now they're doing a U-turn on some of those things, right? For example, restrictions on social media which, for young persons, which is being introduced, right? But 2 years ago, it was all that, we need tablets and we need online textbooks. But we see countries like Finland and Norway rolling that back and saying, actually, we are losing cognitive opportunities for development, because when we write by hand, we engage so many different parts of our brain, fine motor skills, etc., right? It's such a balance between not being left behind and also like overcommitting by being too far ahead without actually understanding the consequences and then having to do a rollback. Let's move on to Tim. Your initial thoughts or opening statement, please.
Thanks, Tanya, and thanks for having me again. Great to be up here. I'd like to take a step back and reflect a bit on how this all ties in with the broader conference theme on youth unemployment and how youth fit in here. So well established over the last 2-3 days that youth unemployment is exceptionally high here, and it's not just because we're a middle-income country and middle-income countries tend to have high youth unemployment or high unemployment. It's not because we're an African country. We have higher rates of youth unemployment, as was established on day one, than the sub-Saharan African average, than the upper middle-income country average. We have unusually high youth unemployment, right? It's not just a development phenomenon. So why I'm mentioning that is because I think there's obviously a fear and anxiety surrounding negative or adverse effects of these new technologies, specifically generative AI. Any negative effects then will land on an already fragile base that we have here, right? This has clear implications for inequality, like some of the work that I discussed in the previous session, as well as together with my colleagues then. Our work specifically suggested that previous technologies hollowed out the middle, right, of an income distribution, increasing inequality. So you're comparing both tails to each other, right? Again, suggesting that the most vulnerable workers seems to be workers whose tasks are repetitive or routine in nature. These are jobs with tasks that are quite common for many entry-level roles that many youth take up, right? Thinking about newer technologies, like I emphasized in the conclusion, newer technologies bring new risks, and it's actually clear that it is not clear that AI will behave as previous technologies has. It is disruptive. Perhaps in some ways it may be overhyped, but in many other ways it's not. These fears are valid, but so too is the optimism. There is an opportunity here, for sure. And the outcomes that we experience, in my view, from newer technologies in general, but specifically generative AI, need not be inevitable. It is largely up to us. It's up to the policy environment. It's up to the regulatory environment. And very unfortunately, it is in large part up to these big tech firms and what they're able to do. But we can determine what they're able to do, right? Political economy aside. One thing I just like to mention then, going back to the whole technology is not inherently or inevitable. It's not inevitably substitutive either. It's not clear that AI will displace a huge amount of jobs in Africa. in South Africa. Technology creates both losers as well as winners, right? It can be both substitutive of and complementary of tasks, of jobs that we're involved in. So I think the youth today have an opportunity to be trained on tasks that are complementary to AI, that AI is complementary to. It's very clear that that AI has the potential to reduce our capacity to maintain a certain level of human capital, right, or educational training, like Tanya, you mentioned. There are a couple of studies now, but there's one in particular in the States from about 2024, maybe 2025, that looked at the effects of providing access to a ChatGPT subscription among students in a couple American colleges. And it was randomized, it was an RCT, etc. And what they found was while students who had access to the conversational AI tool, while they had access to it, they did perform better on standardized test scores. Then what the researchers did was they removed access. And this was some sort of exclusivity agreement. I'm not sure how it worked, but they removed access. Then they followed up the students again a further few months down the line. What did they find? Not only were students who were given access to this tool more similar to those students that never had access to begin with, they performed worse than those students who had never had access to the tool in the beginning. And the researchers argued that this perhaps indicated some sort of crutch-like effect, someone mentioned a psychological dependency of relying on AI and not necessarily accumulating that human capital ourselves, right? So there is a danger there. So, and then I think that also speaks to perhaps increased demand in certain skills that we might see, human skills, over the next few years. We've spoken about human verification or oversight, and very plausibly so. But at the same time, there's so much uncertainty. There's so much speculation. So in closing, I'd like to just emphasize the importance of generating very simple but credible and reliable data on AI awareness, AI perceptions, and of course, actual effects, right? In Africa, and much of the developing world beyond Africa, but just zooming in on Africa in particular, we don't have data. We have, so I must respectively challenge my colleague, my fellow panelist, Professor Ayad's point on the 65% of workers in Africa actively use AI. As far as I understand, this is not true, not necessarily true. We don't know, we don't have the data. To make such a statement, to have that descriptive statistic, you would need to have, for example, representative surveys in every African country asking about, of every worker, or a sample of workers representative of the population, asking about, do you use AI? We don't have that. Even South Africa's official labor force survey doesn't have an AI question yet. There are 3 countries where we have representative sample-based data on awareness or perceptions of AI. That's Kenya, Ghana, and South Africa. I think South Africa's social attitudes survey also recently included an AI module, but it doesn't ask workers about that. So my point isn't just to challenge, but it's just to emphasize that there's a lot we don't know, and there's a lot that we can overcome and get a better idea of both the extent and nature of the challenge if we just put more emphasis on collecting the data that we need to better understand what's facing us, right? I think for the sake of time, I have more to say, but I think I'll just stop there. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask Vusi for some assistance. If you can just read out to the panelists some of the questions and comments that have come from the floor, from the app. And then I'm going to ask Hanlie and Lauren to just pick up on aspects that's relevant that you would like to comment on. Then we'll hand over to Prof. Al-Ani to also comment. I think that there were a few questions which were directed at you as well. And then finally, Tim, you can share your thoughts or comments based on the feedback that we've received from the floor. And then we'll move on to the Young Economists Debating Challenge, where we'll see some of that critical thinking and socio-emotional skills in communication being brought to bear. So over to you, Vusi, if you can just share some of the thoughts and comments from the audience.
Right. Thanks, Tanya. I think by now you and I should agree that Ntombigaise Gijana has been firing from all cylinders when it comes to online questions. She asks now to Dr. Tim, could your findings be reapplied in the GET, where the workforce will significantly reduce if we decommission a faster scale in mining towns? And Anonymous pose a question: what opportunities exist for young people as the government shows a stronger commitment in the shift from fossil fuels to a low carbon emitting economy? Kamokhelo Modise asks whether should South Africa pursue active demand side interventions or focus on removing barriers so the private sector drives tech job creation originally. Should I go further or is this fine? There's still more.
Yeah, I think just give the whole lot and then we'll hand over to the panelists to pick and choose what they feel they can respond to.
Yeah, in fact, there's just one more, I apologize, from Zizi Po Nabe, asking, will the cost of owning AI agents maintain economic disparities in South Africa, locking out communities without infrastructure or skill? The question is, will the cost of owning AI agents maintain economic disparities in SA, that is South Africa, locking out communities without infrastructure or skills?
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so I'm going to hand back to the panelists. Just feel free to pick up on whichever comments resonated with you. So, Hanlie?
Yeah, I think I'll address a little bit about the demand side and removing barriers. I think we have to do both. It's really important that when we look at skills, as I mentioned, we need demand-led skilling. We need to know what is in the market and what skills are needed, especially in the digital economy. This is very prevalent, and therefore demand-led skilling and having that demand programs are extremely important. But it's more than that, and I think in Harambee we see it often. We really have to work with employers and advocate for inclusivity and advocate for young people. So it's important that we all do that, but we can also do that through policy, potentially having more incentives for formal employees to employ young people and include them very deliberately into some statistics and how they should be incentivized to actually employ young people. And then I just want to talk a little bit about the cost of AI, and I'll use a practical example at Harambee. We, as a non-for-profit, we always try to do more with less. And so we, of course, also invest in some tools within our environment. But the cost really does become prohibitive. And I think that is something that we will see, and to Tim's point, it's still very unsure around what that would really look like. And that for me creates this big uncertainty about what that means for the young people and for entry-level workers or routine work, even for devs which do complex work. The generative AI agents are very new. They are expensive to run. And I do think that will be a barrier for us in the global south if that continues, to your point, Prof. Tanya. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Lauren, are there any points that you'd like to pick up on?
Yeah, I think three. One is this demand side versus protections, and completely agree that it has to be both. And I think often when we think about policy, we jump to ideological conclusions rather than looking at what is the data in front of us. And to encourage us to think out of the box, we don't have to follow the formal employment, Fordist era social contract model of extending social insurance and protections to labor to workers. That we very rarely do need to promote informal employment in South Africa. Part of that is platform work, but we need to do so in a way that reduces that precarity. And there are alternative global south models that we can look at to de-risk this kind of work and make it more attractive, not just for platform workers, but for informal workers more broadly. The other thing I wanted to point out, and that's maybe a little bit hidden, and we've touched on it a little, is the human side of things. So you talked about how we have the human touch. And I think more and more as we move into AI, and I know that there's predictions that AI will become more and more human-like, but I do think that some of the growth areas, job growth areas, will be in sectors that are currently undervalued. If you think about social workers, social service paraprofessionals, nurses, etc., they're all, and teachers, they're all very undervalued. We've got loads of these people who are unemployed or paid very poorly. There's potential that the human touch will become more important in a context where we're constantly interacting with technology. And that may be to start thinking about those as potential growth areas as well.
Excellent. Let's hand over to Prof. Al-Ani. Do you have any comments or thoughts you'd like to share based on the feedback that you've received from the audience?
Well, I haven't seen those questions, but I listened to them. Maybe 2 points. One is to answer Mr. Köhler's critique of the number 60. I was too astonished. That's a number. I think I've taken it out from a survey done by PricewaterhouseCoopers consulting company in South Africa. Is it true? Has it been done according to scientific standards? I have no idea. I just found it interesting because it's the same number that is occurring here also in Europe. So I was astonished by that, and also at the second look, I was not surprised, because if you have smartphones, and smartphones are highly dispersed within South Africa, then you automatically have artificial intelligence within the smartphone which you can use. So maybe there could be an explanation, but of course the number can be scrutinized. Second thing I wanted to add for the discussion is that from the early empirical observations we have on how AI is affecting work within traditional organizations, is the fascinating conclusion is that the gap between the very good workers and the weaker workers is closing because of the use of artificial intelligence, digital agents, etc. So certainly also weaker employees can do very good analysis, can write perfect emails, can do better calculations, can do better coding, can do coding at all. So the fascinating thing is that the gap is closing, and it seems to benefit the weaker members of the organization. The very good employees, however you want to phrase it, they are not gaining so much by using digital agents, but it's rather the weaker ones that are benefiting from that. And by doing that, automatically the pace is set within the organization. So you cannot afford to not use AI in order to meet the new standard. So if the new standard has moved up somewhere, you simply cannot say I'm not going to check my analysis by AI. I'm going to stop doing that, or will stop using AI for coding because of whatever reasons I might have. You simply cannot do it. So the thing I want to point out is that once this competency, this artificial competency, has been inserted into the organization, you are almost obliged to use it. For instance, writing an email with 5 spelling errors is considered a bit sloppy, because I mean you could have given it to the Microsoft Copilot. Why didn't you do it? It's almost impolite not to use it. So I think we are entering a stage where I think we can debate whether we like it or not, but there is an immense pressure on the members of the organization to use those kind of technologies.
So if you don't mind, Prof. Al-Ani, I want touch on a contribution from the audience, Ntombika Yisakejana. She is raising issues around government institutional capacity for AI. She says, Prof. Al-Ani, South African institutional capacity for AI is not mature. For example, the Department of Home Affairs, it is not mature. What are the 3 priority areas needed to strengthen before we can have a mass rollout of AI? Just some context for you. Because of the bribery and corruption in the Department of Home Affairs, there's been a move to say, well, actually we need to take humans out of the loop completely and to automate processes, not only like visa, tourism visas, etc., not only in the interest of more efficient service delivery, but also, in the interest of more probity, better control, that sort of thing. But that presupposes that there must be some sort of institutional capacity in place. So I guess the question is, can you kind of leapfrog other stages of maturity to go into AI? Or are there certain prerequisites that need to be in place first before you can really reap the benefits of AI?
I'm not sure whether there is a general answer to that. I think organizations are tempted to use AI to increase their capacities, and they will probably use it in the first stage in let's say easy areas. So, for instance, my understanding is that the South African Tax Authority already uses AI to screen all your tax files, and probably 80% are just normal, and the machine can do it without any doubt and question, because they are standard. And you probably have also used AI in order to fill in the tax form. So AI meets AI there, and then you have 20% of the tax forms that need attention because something doesn't match or is outside the scope of the artificial intelligence, and then you work on that. So I think this is a way on how to do it. Pilot an area, see what the results are, and you can compare the results of the machine to the results of human only work, and then you move on. And I think the incentives to do that are quite high because the machine cannot be corrupted. It doesn't cost very much. Once you have it there, you can scale it and multiply it, and you have suddenly the idea of a wonderful, objective and transparent kind of administration and public sector that follows, so to say, the program, and depends on you on how the program is set. There will be errors. I think we are living now in the area of bad AI. Bad AI meaning that errors occur, then corrections need to be done, and then it will improve. But on the way to the next level, you need to insert additional capacities. And as I said at the beginning of my short speech, you still need people with very strong content skill who can understand the matter of the process and can correct the machine, which is getting more and more difficult. So investing in content know-how is very, very critical, because we will also lose lots of know-how because we will not need it anymore. We will not need specific know-how of calculus, for instance, or certain mathematical equations, because the machine can do it for us. And then maybe we end up in a situation where you say, okay, now I need to recalculate that, and how will I do it by myself? I have lost the ways on how to do it. I think these are all occurrences that will appear in the future. Yeah.
Tim, any closing remarks on your side based on the input of the discussion that we've had so far?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Just quickly on that one question on the JET, I presume that was about the just energy transition. I think the question was, can the approach we used in what I presented in the previous session be applied in that space? The answer is yes, and the additional answer is it already has. I have some colleagues working with the Commission, the Presidential Climate Commission, in that regard, and you essentially, again, you can do this in any space. You, even in the AI space, right, which some countries have already done. You identify the composition of tasks in a given job for all jobs in a given sector or economy. You can then characterize those tasks like we did, where we spoke about them being routine or repetitive or manual in nature, for instance. And then following the literature to develop an index, you can arrive at some measure of exposure or vulnerability. Similarly, in the case of climate change, so looking at coal workers in Mpumalanga, for instance, you can assess how many they are, how vulnerable they are, and then you can assess their skills or profile with respect to the tasks that they tend to do in their jobs. And then that has reskilling policy implications, right? You can see, okay, let's see how close they are, for instance, to alternative jobs that aren't very vulnerable to the just energy transition. So I hope that sufficiently answers that question. And then just jump to complement two comments from my colleagues, Professor Ayad and Lauren, firstly on the demand side. Yes, firstly, Professor, I've also, yes, seen that existing evidence which points to lower skilled or lower experienced workers benefiting more from AI tools within the workspace. I think there's a published study in the States that shows that productivity effects are higher for less experienced workers. They tend to be paid less. So yes, there is this clear opportunity to reduce skill gaps, which is a form of inequality, right? Whether that translates into less wage inequality, I'm not sure. But certainly an opportunity to highlight. So I appreciate you emphasizing that. And then moving from the I guess, demand side of the labor market to the supply side, and I appreciate that throughout the last 3 days, a lot of emphasis has been placed on the demand side, but we still have significant constraints in South Africa facing job seekers in the country, right? In terms of supply, they're the supply of labor. It's expensive to look for work. It can be difficult to find out how to look for work. So these, in addition to many barriers, there are information frictions or constraints, right, that job seekers face. It's difficult to find out where are the existing jobs, what are their characteristics, how do I apply, what's a CV, etc. Also for employers, right, recruitment can be costly. So this obviously speaks a lot to the brilliant work done by Harambee in terms of matching. But AI has the potential, I mean, it already does, right? It reduces the cost of information, of access to information, right? You go on your conversational AI, Claude or ChatGPT, you type in, what is this strange lump on my skin? You can instantly get results. It needs to be verified, right? Needs oversight for sure. But it's clear that information is less costly than it was before. And this is a barrier for job search. And in thinking about resolving unemployment here and thinking about job search frictions, it's very clear that I think there's an opportunity for AI to help job seekers out, in addition to people who already have workers, right? We're doing some work in this regard where we've developed a AI tool tailored to young job seekers in the country, and we'll hopefully have some evidence end of next year. Or maybe AI can help us write the paper quicker, so maybe it'll be out quicker. That'll be nice. But it's very clear in developing this tool, and we're not tech experts, so we've partnered with a tech firm, but it's very clear that AI has the potential to do harm. It can provide you with information, as we all know, that is inaccurate or inappropriate. It can often lack context-specific characteristics that are important to account for. So, Lauren, this I think speaks to your point on the importance of human-AI interaction going forward. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. I'd like to thank Prof. Al-Ani for joining us from Berlin. Thank you very much for your very valuable insights. I also want to thank Lauren, Hanlie, and Tim. They are going to be around a little longer, so please grab them during lunch. I hope that the conversation has just brought home to you how little we actually know, how little data we actually know, and how big the opportunity there is for you to do research in an area that makes a difference. I'm going to hand over to Vusi again, who's going to lead us through the Young Economist debates. I hope you'll all enjoy that. I'm certainly looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Tanya and the panel. Give them a round of applause once again, please. Yeah.